Well, the Renewable Fuels Association is applauding the several provisions within the Inflation Reduction Act. Well, joining us now is RFA Senior Vice President for Government and Public Affairs, Troy Bredenkamp. And Troy, thanks for taking the time to chat with us here today. If you would, just briefly tell us a bit more about this act.
Well, thanks for having me this morning. Yeah, we actually see a lot of good things in here for ethanol. There's certainly provisions for almost every segment of the energy sector, and certainly a lot for clean electricity, clean energy, but obviously biofuels, and in particular ethanol, which is 50% less in carbon intensive than conventional gas. We are getting some recognition in this package as well. So it does do some things with regard to putting infrastructure into the ground. It does some things with a clean fuel production credit that we will qualify for. It starts a tax credit for sustainable aviation fuel, which we think is a large part of ethanol's future. And lastly, it does some work on 45Q, or carbon sequestration, utilization, and storage. And that's a way that we're going to get to net zero ethanol by 2050. So overall, the package we thought was pretty good for ethanol.
How exactly do you think this is going to continue to help ethanol producers, not just here in the nearby, but in the long term?
Well, really what it's going to be able to do is allow for us to open some different markets that may not be available to us today. Right now, we make up 10% of the nation's fuel supply, so we're about 10% of the gas tank. This particular package, with the provisions for the clean fuel production credit and the sustainable aviation fuel tax credit, will allow us to compete long-term with other low-carbon sources for the fuel tank, but it will also open up avenues for us to really be part of this sustainable aviation fuel movement. Corn-based ethanol can compete with making sustainable aviation fuel from alcohol. And this bill allows for some tax incentives to be put into place that will allow us to compete with other feedstocks and make that possible. So long term, we think there are some huge new market potentials for corn-based ethanol.
Now, RFA members pledged last summer to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Does this keep us on target?
It absolutely does. And like I mentioned, that carbon capture, utilization, and storage provision in this bill allows our members and other ethanol plants to participate in that program. That's going to allow us to sequester some of the carbon that is made during the ethanol production process and get us to net zero by 2050 or sooner.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with us today. We appreciate it, Troy. Again, talking with Troy Bredenkamp. He's the RFA Senior Vice President of Government and Public Affairs. Go online to ethanolrfa.org for more information.